there's a crew in town. The head hillbillies are making their rounds. Small town whispers loud and clear. The sheriff shot the judge in his chambers chair.
Sheriff got a secret he won't keep. Judge shot dead in his disbelief. A lot of people have some stories to tell. Dark pass away, get the sound of a shotgun shell.
All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground, rumors fly and they can't be bound.
Neighbors hide behind their blinds, whisper tales of troubled minds. Skeletons covering the mountainside, a treacherous reality in the pines.
Winter reveals the hidden lies. Moonlight couldn't mask their cries. Shadows caught in sunlit skies. There's no cover, no disguise. All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground, rumors fly and they can't be bound.
Winter reveals the hidden lies. Moonlight could mask their cries. Shadows caught in sunlit skies. There's no cover, no disguise.
All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground.
Ah, I have no idea what just happened there, y'all. Technical difficulties. Welcome to the show. My name's Elizabeth. I am your host, and this is Hillbilly Crime. Nothing like live TV. I don't know what happened. Okay, so tonight we are going to be talking about the Houck trial. So Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson and Stephen Lawson, his dad, have all been arrested and held responsible for her. Crystal Rogers went missing. She lived in Bardstown, Kentucky, so this is a Kentucky case. It's more up on the northern, central, western side of Kentucky, maybe more western. But Bardstown is several hours from where we're at here. But there were a whole bunch of deaths that happened in that town that is kind of a mystery. People don't know if they're connected or not. So Crystal Rogers went missing, and Brooks Houck was her boyfriend. They lived together, and they had been going through some problems. They had had some relationship issues. I've heard some tales that she struggled with some substance abuse and stuff. But she also knew a lot. Brooks Houck was a business owner, and he came from a very wealthy family. Their family had been in that area for a long time, and the land, the property that they own, they could trace it back to like the early 1900s in his family. So his family had been a pretty prominent name in that area. Now, he also owned a construction business. So there have been many speculations as to what he did with her body. But Crystal went missing one night. There was supposed to be a date night. They were supposed to have a date night. Now, we're going to watch a few of these news reports. There is a really great network that has covered this case wonderfully. They have really done a good job covering this case. And so we're going to just look at a couple of, let's look at this. This was WHAS, and I'm not sure if that's a 2 ABC, but this was one of them here. And we're going to read it real fast. It says, Crystal Rogers case. Defense shares Brooks Houck's text messages after Crystal Rogers' disappearance. And no electronics were allowed in court, but some of their crew were taking handwritten notes to provide updates throughout the day. The second trial in the death of Crystal Rogers continues into its second day of testimony on Thursday. Rogers went missing over the 4th of July weekend in 2015. So this has been a long time coming. Nearly a decade later, Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson are facing a jury in Warren County together, charged in her death. Let's see. Houck, Rogers' ex-boyfriend, is charged with redrum and tampering with physical evidence. Lawson is charged with conspiracy to redrum and tampering with physical evidence in Rogers' death. His father and co-defendant, Stephen Lawson, was convicted of similar charges in May. And that tells us that nobody ever rolled over on anybody else. How uncommon is that? You know, that's really uncommon. Usually if you have co-defendants, people who were involved in the crime together, usually the one who tells first is the one who gets the better deal. Crystal Rogers case trial updates, 5:49 p.m. Court has just adjourned for the day. The jury returned at 8:30 a.m. on Friday. Danny Singleton was one of the last witnesses to take the stand. During opening statements, the prosecution claimed Brooks Houck's mom, Rosemary, spoke to Singleton 2 weeks prior to Rogers' disappearance. I was shocked when I found out what they're saying about Rosemary Houck. Rosemary is Nick and Brooks Houck's mom. Now, Brooks is the one that's on trial. His brother, Nick Houck, was a Bardstown police officer. So he ended up fired. He got fired because he told Brooks when he was in the police department being interviewed, he called him on the phone and told him to get up and walk out of there and stop talking. And he lost his job as a police officer because of that. I think that they said that he interfered with the investigation and he's not allowed to do that. Now, he also sat for an interview with the police, and he took a lie detector test, the brother, Nick Houck, and he failed. He failed miserably. We watched it. You can look through our playlist, the Houck brothers et al., in anything, any show that we've done regarding this case will be in that playlist. Singleton admitted to having a conversation with Rosemary at a job site. He said she wanted to find someone to get rid of Rogers. So the witnesses now are tying the Houck boys' mom into this conspiracy. Like she was the one who put this all in motion. And, Nick didn't get arrested. And the reason why they're saying that she did this was because Crystal was not good enough for her family. You talk about entitled. You talk about just nasty, evil people. That's pretty bad. And she would have to have felt above the law to put something like that together. Her son was a police officer. And there's more unsolved deaths. Now, after Crystal went missing, her father, her mom and dad were just pounding the pavement every day trying to find their daughter, trying to find out what happened to their daughter. And he ended up, her dad, one morning was going hunting, deer hunting or something, and had one of Crystal's children with him, and they were headed out to go hunting, and somebody shot through the trees, and he was shot and killed. There she is. There's Sweet Tater. How you doing, Mommy?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Good, good, good. All right, let me get back to this article. 453. Oh, no. I told her around this town and with money, you can get anything done, he testified, adding that he didn't tell Brooks Houck about the conversation. So this must have been somebody that worked for Brooks if it was at a job site. It's the truth that she wanted someone to do it, not me to do it. 4:53 p.m. After Snow stepped down from the stand, Judge Charles Sims asked the jury if they had any questions, which they did. Now, this is very interesting. In some courtrooms, I thought it would be probably statewide, but apparently not. I've never seen this happen in Letcher County Court. But some judges will ask the jury members if they have any questions, and they'll take questions from the jury. Excuse me. Jurors wanted to know if the clothes that Rogers was seen wearing in the Walmart surveillance video was found inside her home, which Snow said no. They also wanted to know if Brooks Houck left voicemails for Rogers when she didn't pick up the phone after her disappearance. Good questions. Snow said investigators don't believe he did. So that means, he wasn't really worried about where she was at and calling her trying to find out where she was at. Let's see. The jury then heard from several business owners and witnesses who denied seeing Houck on July 3rd. even though he claimed to have met with them that day. Many said they were closed due to the holiday weekend. So he's trying to say, he was trying to give some bogus alibi, and none of his alibi witnesses are backing anything he's saying up, which is awesome. One of the witnesses was the owner of a Radio Shack in Bardstown, Marcella Ray, who sold Houck an audio recorder on July 6, 2015. She said Houck specifically wanted to buy the best that he could. Ray said she printed out a photo of Houck holding the recorder and child because it stood out to her. She testified that every time his son would lift his head, Houck would tell him to put it down. She held on to the records and receipt until 2020 when she contacted the FBI. One of the bigger moments of Thursday's testimony came when a realtor named Richie Riggs, who worked often with Houck to sell homes, took the stand. During his testimony, Riggs said he ran into Rogers about a week before she disappeared, and she accused Houck of cheating on her. Immediately following that statement, the attorneys spoke with the judge, who told the jury that statement couldn't be considered evidence. Prosecutor Shane Young continued questioning Riggs, who then said Rogers was worried about Houck kicking her out of the house. That happens so many times, especially around here. Financial abuse is a serious thing. You know, if you're from the poor side of the tracks and you hook up with somebody on the rich side of the tracks, it usually, you know, doesn't end up very well, especially whenever, you know, you go to split. You know, a lot of times greedy people, you know, people that are wealthy are very greedy people. Usually that's the case. At least in my experience, that's been the case. And, you know, they don't want to share any money. If they think that they're going to have to pay child support, or, you know, then all of a sudden you start hearing, well, she trapped me, I shouldn't have to pay for this kid that I didn't want. I mean, you know, it's just not very good. And it can cause people to do really bad things when they think that somebody is going to get a penny of their money. Or it doesn't even have to have anything to do with money. You know, if she knew too much, if he was committing crimes of some kind and she knew too much, you know, he might be afraid that she would tell on him or get him arrested or anything like that. Okay. So the defense's cross-examination of Snow continues. Schroing pointed to Brooks Houck's phone records, which show he tried calling Rogers twice on July 4th and once on July 5th, 2015. Snow said it appears those calls went to voicemail. Houck then texted Barbara Roby, a relative of Rogers and a former Bardstown police officer, asking if she's been able to reach Rogers. She said she also hadn't heard from her. He then asked Roby for another relative's phone number, Sabrina Ballard, to again try to locate Rogers, but to no luck. Everyone is worried sick. Please call me back. Houck texts Rogers after being unable to contact her. according to screenshots shown in court. Schroing said Houck wasn't worried at first when Rogers went missing because she had left before, to which Snow said that would happen if they were fighting. Which, she had a really good family. Like, she was really close to her mom, I think. Her mom and her dad, like, super close. And so I don't think that she didn't have anywhere to go. It's not like if they were to have split up, she didn't have anywhere to go. She did. She had family. And she had family that supported her and that loved her. Okay. The defense then showed jurors more screenshots of texts between Houck and Rogers on April 25th, 2015. In the messages, Rogers accused Houck of not treating her right, and he tells her that leaving home with nowhere to go isn't safe. Running from your problems won't fix them, he says in another text, 1:12 p.m. Court is now on a lunch break. Prior to the break, Brooks Houck's defense attorney, Steve Schroing, began his cross-examination of former Nelson County Detective John Snow. Snow confirmed that after 4 years of investigation, there had been no arrests or any evidence discovered in the case. We had no information of the method of death, Snow told Schroing. The defense also showed text messages between Steve Lawson's son-in-law and Houck, in which they were looking for a house in August of 2015. He argued Steve Lawson's stepdaughter was looking for a house when he called Brooks on July 3rd, 2015. Schroing also said that detectives had received a tip from a couple who said they saw Rogers on July 5th in a red sedan on Highway 49. They said she looked distraught and upset. When court returns from break, the defense will continue. Okay. 12:42. 12:04. The prosecution continued. Houck then tells the detective that they didn't stop anywhere after leaving the farm and just went straight home. Prosecutors also played the prosecutor Shane Young then plays the portion of Houck's interview where his brother Nick Houck and then Bardstown police officer calls to advise Houck to end the conversation, which he does. Snow testified that before the phone call, Nick Houck was never suspected to police in Rogers's case. Nick Houck was never suspected. Okay. The jury then hears Brooks Houck's interview with Nancy Grace, where he is questioned about the night Rogers went missing. He said the night was nothing special and didn't realize Rogers was gone until the next morning. Surveillance video was also shown in court where Houck's truck can be seen, followed by Nick Houck's police cruiser. On July 9th, 2015, Snow called Nick Houck into the station for questioning. Then Bardstown Police Chief Rick McCubbin also made the decision to have Houck's police cruiser processed for evidence. Young shows the jury photos of the car's trunk. Several days later, authorities searched the Houck family farm but find nothing. Houck asked what it would take to clear his name, Snow said. I told him to provide more details in his statement. Did he do that? Asked Young. He did not, Snow said. Snow testified, let's see. Snow testified, excuse me, that there's been no sign of Roger's existence since the night of July 3rd, 2015. He said the IRS tried tracking her social security number, but there were still no signs. Why were you so focused on July 3rd into July 4th? Young said. Houck says he goes home with her, but we could never find lost my place. It jumped on me. Said he goes home with her, but we could never verify that, and no one ever saw her past that day, Snow responded. 10:40 a.m. Snow is back on the stand and starting the second day of testimony by showing the jury more video from Houck's police interviews. This must have went from bottom up. During a let's see, where is it at? During a July 7th, 2015 interview with Kentucky State Police, Houck was asked what the worst thing that's ever happened to him, but he couldn't answer the question. The following day, Snow said he reviewed phone records for Rogers and Houck. That's when he noticed the midnight phone call on Houck's phone. Snow told the jury that up until then, Houck didn't mention that call. Snow said he called Houck for another interview, which was also played for the jury. What I'm struggling with is what you guys were doing on the farm, Snow tells Houck. The former detective said Houck took roughly an hour and a half to write a full statement of what happened on July 3rd. Houck then began reading it out loud as Snow was observing from another room. Prosecutor Shane Young handed out copies of the statement to jurors. After the interview is complete, Snow said he reviewed the footage and noticed that Houck was adjusting an audio recorder in his pocket when he walked into the room. Sheesh. Yeah, this went upside down. Let's see. Okay. Let me get back over here to it. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to keep reading it. But this way it doesn't mess up nothing. And we're going to watch the report, the news report. Yeah, this went upside down. I wish they would have done it the other way around. Witness testimony picked up this morning. Jurors will continue hearing from former Nelson County Detective John Snow. Okay. Yeah, that was... We should have started at the very bottom, I guess. That's kind of odd. That was the end of it anyway, you guys. Okay. You got any comments you want to say, Mom?
No.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay. The mother of the defendant was allegedly the criminal mastermind. Blows me away. Listen to
Decade now underway in Kentucky, the murder of Crystal Rogers, right here on WHAS 11 Plus. I'm Doug Proffitt from WHAS 11 News. Stunning claims right out of the gate this morning. Allegations we haven't heard over these 10 long years that the mother of the chief suspect
I don't know why it's starting to do this again. I'm sorry, you guys. Okay, so we've not heard this the very first time. For the 10 years that she's been missing, the entire time that Brooks Houck has been accused of her disappearance and her death, we are now hearing accusations that his mother, Rosemary, was the mastermind of the crime. Blows me away. I had never heard this at all.
Well, let's pick up that storyline with our Shay McAllister, who's been in that courtroom down in Bowling Green, Kentucky, where the trial's being held.
During this
Well, Zelmy left. She said, forget this. It's not going to work. We're going to try one more time, y'all. I can't stand it.
before Crystal went missing, there will be evidence presented this week that Rosemary Houck had a conversation with Danny Singleton. Danny Singleton was arrested very early on in this case, back in 2015, 2016, on perjury charges. During that conversation, the prosecutor said Rosemary Houck approached Danny to ask if he can find someone to get rid of Crystal. Danny tells her if you have enough money, you can get anything done. The prosecutor specifically said Danny didn't agree to do it. It kind of ended there. But then, of course, 2 weeks later, Crystal's missing. her and Brooks. Brooks had called her earlier in the day saying that he had something special planned, a surprise date night. And this was a big deal because the relationship was very strained at this time. A friend of Crystal and Crystal's cousin both testified, explaining that they talked to Crystal earlier in that day on July 3rd, and she was really looking forward to the surprise night. She didn't know what to expect. They did end up at the farm, and at the farm that night, they say that Crystal didn't leave. I'm going to bring in my colleague now, Alexandra Goldberg. She was sitting in for the defense side of the opening statements, and she was able to hear a little bit more about what was said on that part.
Right. One theme that we heard during prosecution was use common sense. Well, on defense, it's a little bit different. We heard the theme of pressure. Right off the gate, the attorney for Brooks Houck, Steve Shoring, said pressure, pressure, pressure on this case. He said that certainly the media is suspecting Brooks Houck. He named local media, state media, national media, documentaries, podcasts for sort of, setting the scene that Brooks has been this default character in the situation because law enforcement hasn't been able to fill in any of those gaps. Here's another quote from Shoring. He says, quote, because of this pressure, it became a very dangerous case, a case that is dangerous to our system of justice. He says that facts are being replaced with suspicions and theories. And he says that both Houck and Joseph Lawson have been charged with horrific crimes that they did not commit. Now, moving a little bit further along in the defense's opening statement, we heard their storyline. This is something that we've heard before, that Crystal, Brooks, and Eli went to the Houck family farm, as we've been mentioning, got home just after midnight. Brooks went to bed first, and then Crystal was gone in the morning, so as with her car as well. Another main point that we heard here was about the cooperation of Brooks. Steve Shoring says that Brooks has been highly cooperative, that he allowed law enforcement to do searches for his home and his car without search warrants, and that he's been really cooperative during this, which is something that we haven't really reported in full yet. I want to move on to some other really interesting points in the defense opening statement. This is where they poke holes in some of the items that prosecution has been talking about in their opening statements, and also just sort of painting the picture here. Steve Shoring said that you might hear Brooks Houck did not go on search parties. He said, well, why? Because the Nelson County Sheriff told him not to. Second point here, Steve Shoring says the Commonwealth says Brooks Houck had tinted his truck windows. And
to make sure that when he was leaving the farm and Crystal wasn't in the car, no one would be able to see it.
right, and the defense had a rebuttal to that. They said,
So they said that he went and tinted the windows on the car right before this happened. So whenever if the car was seen leaving, nobody would be able to say she wasn't in it. That's some elaborate planning when you go so far to even tint the windows on the car.
the truth is their son Eli had a significant eye condition, making him sensitive to light. So there's sort of, where their storylines and their arguments there are squaring up against each other.
Mm-hmm. Doug?
Shay, Alexandra, thank you very much. And the top legal analyst on this case is WHAS 11's own Nick Mudd, who is a Louisville attorney. He has been breaking this down. And Nick, of course, every single one of the attorneys there, including the prosecutor. I want to start with the Rosemary Houck bombshell that came out today. The mother of Brooks Houck, of course, a grandmother as well. How is it that she's not charged if they are calling her basically the alleged mastermind behind this killing 2 weeks before it happened?
I mean, they came out and called her a co-conspirator today.
Unindicted.
Unindicted co-conspirator. But I mean, they confirmed it in an opening statement here today and laid it out. you know, I would assume based on the evidence they have, they didn't feel like their case was strong enough to charge her. But to not charge her and say that in court is a pretty bold statement. Now, I know Jim Lisowski, he is kind of the godfather of prosecution. I mean, he's mentored probably every lawyer in the room, mentored myself. I mean, he's as good as it gets. But to come out and say that, you know, without having her charged is a pretty bold move, but they have to have some sort of evidence to back it up.
So apparently Rosemary Houck thought that her son could do better, didn't like Crystal Rogers. And according to the prosecutor, Jim Lisowski today, had a plan in her mind to get rid of her.
How many people have you guys known like that? I've known a ton of women, especially in this area of Eastern Kentucky, that their boys were mommy's boys, and nobody could ever be good enough. The mommy hated every girlfriend they ever dated, and it just toxic, relationships. Always having the in-law in your business, always calling mommy. I know you guys have known people like that too.
We seeing Rosemary Houck in that courtroom.
Well, I mean, that's what they threw out, so that's what they're going to have to go on. You know, as a prosecutor, you can't throw this theory out. You're the one to wear the white hat. You can't tell lies when you get up there. Not supposed to lie anyway, but you can't tell lies as a prosecutor because the jury's going to hold, it's your burden. They're going to hold you to it. So there has to be some sort of evidence they're going to do to tie that in. But that being said, the fact that they came out and said that she has a Fifth Amendment right not to testify if they're stating that she is a co-conspirator here. And I certainly believe, should they try to call her as a witness, she's going to assert that right. She's going to have a lawyer and then say, look, I'm not testifying. And even what's more important from a legal standpoint, if a prosecutor knowingly calls to the stand a witness who has a Fifth Amendment right that they believe is going to assert the Fifth, that's grounds for a mistrial, Doug.
At the end of this broadcast, 30 minutes, I'm going to ask you who won the day. We're going to because you've heard the defense attorney, Steve Schroering, and you've heard the prosecutor side as well. I do want to talk to you about how this is turning into becoming more, as Shay has been using in her reporting, a family affair. The net is widening. In the Steve Lawson case, we heard Nick Houck's name a lot.
Right.
Now zeroing in on Rosemary. What's this approach about?
Well, I think they're trying to give more of a motive here. Now, as I've stated before, prosecutors don't need a motive, but I do think they're trying to give a reason why this happened and give the jurors something to grasp onto, because I assume they're going to give a timeline moving forward in the next 10 days or so of events and fill in the gaps. But it's nice to have a why this happened and give the jurors some sense of a purpose for why they're all there for the murder.
I think that everybody's going to be expecting, why was Nick Houck not arrested and charged as something, whether it would be like accessory after the fact or something. And if the prosecutor has enough suspicion that she was the one, and they had a witness, they had an eyewitness that she allegedly said this to. Now, I don't know how hearsay stuff works in court, but he was allowed to get up there and testify about her telling him that. So, that makes me question why. And look at all the other deaths. I know that they're not on trial for them, But us true crimers out here that do know the other history, you've got the police officer Jason Ellis that was his death is still unsolved, and you have the mother and the daughter, the school teacher and her teenage daughter that were both unalived in Bardstown. We don't know if those are connected, those cases are connected. Plus her father, Crystal Rogers' own daddy, Tommy Ballard. There's just no way that you have that much coincidence involved in all this. We're still missing pieces. And remember what I said, it's really unusual to have so many co-defendants and not one of them roll over and rat the others out. That just usually happens. But why wouldn't they? Would they, if there were still people out there who could be charged and they're trying to keep them, protect them, they might not speak. They might not talk if there's more that could go down.
Well, let's talk about a motive. Do you buy the motive that it was Rosemary, the mom, who just didn't like Crystal, and it's time to kill her? I mean, do you buy that as the motive, and then Brooks just pulled it off in a 2-week period?
I certainly want to hear more about that, because that seems a little extreme when you hear it. I mean, the gut reaction is, whoa, we've never heard that. And that seems a little intense to come out, especially to say that in opening statement when she's not indicted. However, I am curious what the prosecutor is going to do to fill in those gaps to show that, and what evidence they're going to have to prove that, because that seems like a bold claim.
How about Lisowski's contention that this was all under the cloak of a surprise date, that Brooks Houck had convinced Crystal to go on a date, and that's how he lured her into her death?
Well, I think what he was doing there is trying to set up the timeline of why Brooks would have been with Crystal that night. We did hear from one witness today who stated that Crystal thought she was going to have a kid-free night with Brooks, and that she was excited about it. I think there was a witness who had saw Crystal earlier that day at Walmart. So I think they're kind of setting the scene, filling in the gaps with the witnesses to kind of show that we do know that Brooks was with Crystal that night, and certainly he was the last person that saw her alive.
Prosecutors went on to say that the romantic date obviously didn't happen, but they went to the Houck farm, which has been sort of the focal point for us over these 10 years. A lot of searches of the Houck farm, where they believe that's where Crystal Rogers was killed. But again, this is a circumstantial case.
Absolutely. So, you know, I mean, and one of the big things I think that was pointed out in an opening statement by the defense was, look, Brooks has been cooperative from the beginning. He let search the farm without a warrant, search his home without a warrant, search his car without a warrant, and he gave a statement without an attorney.
Does that kind of thing connect with the jury?
I think it does.
It was sort of the obvious, it was sort of a common sense approach by Steve Schroering, trying to appeal to the jurors with a plausibility of what Brooks Houck may have been thinking or doing. But does it really connect, since we really don't know any more details?
Well, I do think it's funny that you say that he tied in that common sense approach, because Jim Lisowski says in opening statement, you know, use your God-given common sense here. And then we have Steve Schroering stand up and say, of course, common sense was he didn't do anything wrong. He let them search all they want because he's innocent.
So out of the gate, attorney Steve Schroering, who again is working for Brooks Houck, said this case is built on assumptions, not evidence, because of pressure on law enforcement and the explosion of publicity. That's right out of the gate. Do you think that's a theme for the next 2 weeks?
I think absolutely. I think what we're going to see is a lot of witnesses testify who's given multiple statements, and they're going to show that those witnesses have told multiple stories. And the theme will be, look, they've been pressured by law enforcement to come in here and testify against Brooks Houck, when that's not really the truth of what they're stating.
Okay, the very specific detail about the tinting of the windows. But he got this car, the tinting of the windows, early so that nobody would be able to see the passenger side.
Right.
Dive into that. I know that fascinated you, that kind of detail.
Well, you know, when I heard that, I thought, wow, that's okay. That certainly that sways the prosecution. But I tell you, Steve Schroering attacked every single detail of the Commonwealth's opening statement, and he had an explanation for that. Hey, Brooks's child had eye issues. That's why he went and got the windows tinted.
One of the lines that we're reporting tonight from the attorney, Brooks Houck was the answer to a mystery that they couldn't figure out.
Right.
This doubt is going to be a major theme.
I'll tell you the biggest doubt, Doug, is something we already heard from Jon Snow today. Crystal's car is found on the side of the road, but Jon Snow testified that it had a flat tire that was believed to have happened while she was driving. I think what the defense is going to hint at here is, look, this is a young lady who's out. You know, she gets a flat tire, she's pulled over, and essentially someone comes to help her, and potentially she's kidnapped or harmed in some way, something of that nature, and that we don't know. And we also know that there are hairs that haven't been tested. And further, the prosecution does not have DNA in that car really linking other people with the case, especially on the steering wheel and things of that nature.
Jon Snow, who was the lead detective at the time. Okay, we're going to talk. I know you want to talk more about the cell phone evidence that came out, which is also something that's caught your attention. Let's go back to Shay live in Bowling Green. And Shay, Crystal's daughter, Kylie Fenwick, took the stand today and testified that Brooks had actually talked to her about adopting her. What happened there, and what did we learn about the night that Rogers was first noticed to be gone?
Very emotional testimony from Kylie. She was the very first witness on the stand today. She was wearing pink in support of her mother. She described how she was just 14 years old when her mom disappeared. They were very close. They talked every single day. And in fact, for the first few months that her mom and Brooks were together, she really liked Brooks. She said that Brooks talked about officially adopting her, about giving her his last name. And that's something that meant a lot because her biological dad isn't in the picture. And so to have a father figure was really meaningful to her. But she said everything changed when the son that Crystal and Brooks had was born. When he was born, Kylie said the relationship started to change between Brooks and Crystal, and her relationship with Brooks started to change. She said very early on there, Brooks was making decisions that were all about that little boy. He decided that Kylie and her sister would be sleeping in the basement, an unfinished basement. She mentioned seeing centipedes crawling next to her once. She said it wasn't good and she wasn't happy with it. Well, the day that Crystal went missing, she was staying at her grandmother's house. She tried to get in touch with Crystal the next day. She wasn't able to. She talks about multiple text messages, multiple calls that go unanswered. And then eventually she starts calling Brooks and texting Brooks, asking if he knows where Crystal is. She said those messages went unanswered as well. And when she finally did go home, hoping to find her mom back at home, leaving her grandmother's house. The house was dark. She said she opened the bedroom door that Brooks and Crystal shared, and Brooks jumped up and said, your mom's not here. And Kylie said, well, where is she? And Brooks told her she's out with a friend. And that was it. And Kylie had no reason not to believe that. But of course, the family was growing suspicious at this time. After Kylie left the stand, they called a friend of Crystal's and then Crystal's cousin. And both of those women were describing conversations on July 3rd, the final day before Crystal goes missing. They described talking to Crystal about her plans for the evening. And Crystal was really excited about this date night. She said it was a surprise. It'd been a very long time since Brooks and Crystal had a night away from their kids. But all of Crystal's 4 kids had places to be that night that was prearranged, with the exception of the son that she shares with Brooks. And Crystal didn't know what it was. She didn't know where they were going to go, what they were going to do, but she was really excited about this opportunity to spend some quality time with Brooks. The next witness to take the stand was Detective Jon Snow. And I'm going to bring in Alexandra Goldberg now because Alexandra was in the courtroom taking the notes on Jon Snow, who of course we've heard testify before. He testified in the Steve Lawson case. He was the lead on this investigation for the first 4 years before the FBI took over.
Right. And it was when Jon Snow took the stand to where we really learned about those final hours of Crystal Rogers, how she spent them before she went missing, and also what the first evidence was sought after. So there's 3 main exhibits here, videos that were played to the jury and in the courtroom that I'm going to talk about. This first one, Jon Snow says that when Crystal Rogers' car was located on the Bluegrass Parkway, of course, her purse was found in there. He took some photos of what they found in Crystal Rogers' purse. Included in those photos were some receipts that show she went to Walmart earlier in the day at 4:30. So they were able to identify the exact time she was at Walmart speaking with her cousin, right? And they were able to pull surveillance video from Walmart cameras of her walking throughout the store into the parking lot. And that video was showed to the courtroom. So that was about 4:30, right? So just a couple hours before Crystal and Brooks had planned to go to the family farm. The other exhibit that was shown to the court was that initial interrogation between Jon Snow and Brooks Houck from July 5th. The video lasted about an hour. It was a long video. The jury watched it, and some of the questioning that Shane Young had asked Jon Snow revealed some answers for us. So Snow says that at that point they didn't have anything to verify. She went home. Also verified that Brooks claimed he got 0 calls that late night, but Snow later confirmed that Steve Lawson had called him. Says Houck claimed it was Rogers' idea to go to the Houck farm. These are points that we've heard discussed over and over again during these opening statements. The third exhibit that we saw as Jon Snow was taking the witness stand today was, I'm just, again, looking at my notes to make sure I get these quotes verbatim. We saw also some interesting weather video that when it was presented to the jury and the courtroom, you could see it was very clearly raining all day, which brings up some of the questions that, prosecution have been asking in the courtroom. Why would Crystal want to go to the farm in such bad weather? You could see it was clearly raining in these videos, but you could also see Brooks' truck at 4:30 near the Houck family farm. So now we have confirmed that Brooks did visit the Houck family farm earlier that day as well.
Doug?
Okay, Shay, thank you very much. Before we let you all go, one last question for you, Shay, because you went out of the gate today running fast with this information. And again, no cameras allowed in the courtroom, and I can see you holding that great notebook of yours with the meticulous notes, so thorough. What do you expect for tomorrow as they get started?
Well, we do know that Jon Snow will be taking the stand again. The jurors will see a 90-minute video. Then we'll see other witnesses take the stand as well.
Doug, they listed more than 50 potential witnesses when they were doing jury selection. And we know that this trial is slated to take 10 days. So we've got a lot of evidence to hear. We've got a lot of people to hear from. And of course, this is now this week, next week, and the week after. So a long ways still to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Shay and Alexandra. I know you've got a long day again for tomorrow, so we'll let you all go, and we'll finish our broadcast here with WHS 11 legal analyst Nick Mudd, who is also in.
I don't know this lawyer, this Nick Mudd guy, but I've heard him and be an analyst before, and I like him. I like him a lot.
Contact with many different sources, and you also happen to know everybody involved in this case. Something you wanted to spend some time on, and this comes from earlier reporting by Shay and Alexandra. By the way, I don't know if you all know about our blog. It's on our website, WHAS11.com. It is put together by our journalists covering this and our digital journalist, Joseph Garcia. It's excellent. You follow it. I follow it. That's where I get information.
That's what I was reading from, is that blog. And I posted the link in the description of the video, and I posted a whole bunch of links in there if you guys want to go and dig through them all.
Through the day, it's nearly hour by hour, or when Shay and Alexandra can come out of the courtroom and report their notes. This is really the old school way of covering a courtroom before the cameras were allowed in the courtroom. Of course, this judge has denied it. The defense also offered this different explanation as to why the Lawson's phones, Steve and Joseph, pinged near the Bluegrass Parkway. Attorney Schroering said Steve Lawson's girlfriend at the time hid a shared car from him on a road near where Rogers abandoned the car was found. He said the two Lawsons went there to get that car. Their phones were picked up by cell phones on the Bluegrass Parkway, because they were the closest, Houck's defense argued. You are fascinated by the cell phone information. For the past year, you have told me you really believe that's going to be key in this case. Explain this. And how would you pick this apart?
I think that what the defense is going to do, they have to face it head on. It's there. It's the scientific evidence in the case that is available. I suspect what they're doing is giving a plausible explanation of why those phones hit off the cell phone towers. And that makes sense. It's something they want to attack out of the gate. They want to get in front of it, and they want to let the jury know, what kind of indoctrinating the jury of what to expect. So the prosecution, to kind of take the sting out of the prosecution when they try to start taking these phone records and narrowing down locations, times, and things like that, where the Lawsons were, where Brooks Houck was, where Crystal was, etc.
Part of the testimony that came out today, some of the former detectives talking about how they immediately went to the Houck farm and they were looking for something that had been burned there. Police say they did find a large burn pile, but said it was mostly just construction material.
Right. And I don't make much out of that. I mean, certainly they were searching, but what they found made sense, and Brooks was involved in construction. And, that it seemed to be confirmed when they saw that, that's all that was available. So
even a fascinating detail that our reporters posted at 5:21 tonight, our time, that the former detective, we're talking about John Snow again, also spoke about the dozens of tips police have received since Roger's disappearance, which have been everything from she's working at a Waffle House in Rhode Island to she's working at a nursing home. But then he had to go on and say the obvious, that they've been unable to verify whether she even made it home on July 3rd, 2015.
Right. And, usually defense lawyers especially, and sometimes prosecutors, depending on the tip, will say, look, those are tips. They're not people that testified. They're irrelevant to this case. All that matters is witnesses who've seen, heard, or experienced a situation, or what is the testimony you need to consider.
So explain once again, can you get a murder conviction? And again, Brooks Houck in this case is the only one charged with murder. Joseph Lawson, tampering with physical evidence, and conspiracy to commit murder, just like his dad, Steve Lawson, earlier. Can you get a conviction without evidence of a body? And is that why the prosecutor came out so strong yesterday, right off the gate, to let everybody know, hey, jury, we don't have the evidence you might think that we have not revealed yet?
It is extremely difficult to get a murder conviction on a case without a body, because you don't have a body, you don't have a cause of death, you don't have a weapon, you don't really have the where and the specifics of how someone passed away, which usually are the things that you use to build your case against someone. And we don't have any of that here. And I think that's why the prosecution came so strong, not just an opening statement. They came out in jury selection. That's one of the first few questions they asked, and said, hey, this is a homicide without a body. Would you be able to convict, essentially? And so, they've owned up to it right away. They weeded out the jurors who could not. And, it's something that one of the rules of prosecution is you got to own the bad facts up front. You have to. If you don't, you lose all credibility with the jury. And I think the prosecution did a good job of owning that single, which is the single worst fact for them. And it's a very bad fact. It's a tough case to prove. Certainly, they owned it right out of the gate.
So if they are guilty, and we don't know that yet, the jury is going to decide. They have the final say in this, of course. So far on the face of it, they did a good job of getting rid of Crystal Rogers' body. But then we see the FBI doing those massive search.
Right.
They're looking at records, data, information. Everything about our lives is known in an easy Google search these days, Nick. So is this going to come out? Is this going to be the next bombshell, what's in those records? Or do we think they were also good enough to keep anything about this case out of those many electronic records?
Well, I mean, I don't want to say who's guilty or innocent. That's up to the jury to decide. But certainly, nothing that I've seen so far indicates where this body would be located. And I'm curious if there are any electronic, data that's going to be produced to tie Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson to. It's going to be interesting. Text messages, phone calls, recordings. We know those exist. Certainly there's going to be a lot more here, though, I believe, in this case than we saw in the Steve Lawson trial.
Well, remember how quickly the jury convicted Steve Lawson.
They did. They did.
I mean, they were out moments.
But I think these attorneys luckily have had another year to prepare. And we saw Steve Shoring come out in opening statement and discredit every single thing the prosecutor had to say. And as I've told you, Jim Lisowski is one of the best prosecutors in the game. But Steve Shoring came out and he systematically dismantled and gave an explanation for every single claim that they made.
What was the information load again? The amount? What was it? Gigabytes that they had to go through?
Yeah, it was. I know 200,000 to 400,000 pages, and I believe it was over 200 hours of recordings and videos, 200 to 300 hours, something of that nature.
So has Brian Butler and his team gone through all of that? Do you think they know every inch of it?
I can tell you, personally speaking with Brian, this case has bogged him down for the last 18, 20 months more than any other. The look of stress on his face every time I see him, a joke, how's it going? And I know he's working.
So let's talk about as this plays out through the week. Tomorrow we're going to head into day 2.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what tomorrow brings? Most likely more bombshells. As we stand right now, who's doing the better job?
I think the prosecution came out swinging. They came out strong. They gave a great opening. However, I will say I was surprised at the way Steve Shoring was able to explain not just the big details, the small details, things like the tinted windows on the car. That stuff matters to jurors. And I would say, if we're keeping score here, I think the defense scored a little one up here today.
So the defense is up after day
right
one.
now. After the opening statements and at least what we've heard so far, I think the defense has the edge right now. They did such a great job in opening. And remember, Joseph Lawson's counselors, Robert Boyd, and Kevin, they both made a split-second decision to reserve opening, which, Doug, as I've told you, happens in maybe 1% of the cases where you don't give an opening. But, 95% of the prosecution's opening statement was about Brooks Houck. It wasn't about Joseph Lawson. And Steve Shoring got up and said, hey, not only is Brooks Houck innocent, Joseph Lawson's also innocent. And they felt the need to say, hey, we're going to do more harm than good talking. So we're just going to sit back and see what proof they provide.
We're looking at Joseph Lawson in the orange jumpsuit there. His attorneys didn't give an opening statement. Was that shocking to you? Have you ever seen that happen before?
It was. And I mean, just reserving, that is, I have only seen that in one trial I ever had. And I will say the lawyer that did it, he won that trial.
So what's the purpose for it?
Well, a lot of times, you don't want to overpromise something as a defense lawyer. You look like you're lacking credibility or that you're hiding something. So I think because so much of the prosecution's opening focused on Houck, not on Lawson, they decided to say, hey, we're just going to sit back, let this play out, and let all the focus be on Brooks Houck while we kind of skate by.
All right, excellent analysis and work again, Nick Mudd. Thank you very much, Nick, here at the end of day one, giving the check mark, at least the edge to.
Right. And then we're going to watch this midday from today.
Rogers' boyfriend and his alleged accomplice. We're taking a closer look at what's happened so far in court, taking a look at those 3 takeaways you need to know from the courtroom. Yesterday, full of bombshells. At first, prosecutors claimed the plan to kill Crystal was a family affair that started weeks before her disappearance. Houck's mom, Rosemary, and brother Nick have been called unindicted co-conspirators, still under investigation in this case, but neither have ever been arrested or charged. Next, the defense painted a different picture of what happened on Bluegrass Parkway, where Crystal's car was found. Houck's attorney said Crystal hid their shared car from Houck, and the Lawsons were helping to pick it up. And finally, the defense is claiming Houck was taking Crystal on a surprise date the night she was last seen alive. Well, this morning, the jury heard testimony around the first police interview with Brooks Houck. Our Alexander Goldberg was inside that Warren County courthouse. Alexandra, what have we learned?
was reported missing. Now, yesterday, we know that Snow spoke about what he found in Rogers' abandoned car. Of course, it was abandoned on the Bluegrass Parkway mile marker 14. Left in the car was her purse, and inside of the purse, there were some receipts, including some Walmart receipts. And based off of those receipts, Snow was able to find that Crystal Rogers was in Walmart at 4:30. Now, he was able to obtain surveillance video of Crystal Rogers with her 2 kids walking outside of Walmart. So we did see Rogers' final hours before she was reported missing on tape. Moving forward here, yesterday we saw the July 5th interrogation between Snow and Brooks Houck, where Snow says his statements that he provided in the interrogation room were, for the most part, mundane. The one thing that he thought was strange is that Brooks didn't report Crystal missing. Moving forward to this morning, a juror saw the July 8th interrogation, and we've had this video for 10 years. We've seen this video before, but one new element we have not heard yet. John Snow says that he saw Houck fumble with the tape recorder. Another element to bring up here, Snow tells Houck that he's a person of interest on the case. He also tells him that he's struggling to understand why they were on the family farm. Rogers, Houck, and Eli, why they were on the farm in the rain for that many hours, over 4 hours, and with a young baby. Jurors also got a copy of Brooks' handwritten statement that he provided on July 8th in the interrogation room. Snow saying it took him an hour and a half to write that. So jurors had that statement. Snow is still on the stand as we speak.
So now let's take a look back. We know the opening statements are kind of like a roadmap for these cases. What kind of case are prosecutors and defense trying to build here?
Right, Brooke. A roadmap is exactly what we're talking about here. Shay and I have been saying for the last day or so that prosecution is setting up their argument as common sense. Of course, it's a no-body homicide. We know that they're prosecuting based on primarily circumstantial evidence, no body, no confession, no weapon. Defense, however, they're saying that there's a lot of pressure in this case, pressure from the media, pressure from documentaries and podcasts, pressure on law enforcement to paint Brooks Houck as sort of, the easiest way to fill in the gaps that law enforcement couldn't build. So there's a couple of details that I want to go through here. Prosecution paints this picture that Brooks wanted a kids-free romantic night with Rogers the night of July 3rd, 2015. So we have the attorney, Jim Lasowski, say that Crystal is at home with her son, Eli, goes into Walmart and runs into Amanda Greenwell, who later testifies. And Crystal Rogers says that she gets a phone call from Brooks Houck, who says they'll have a kids-free romantic evening. That is a witness testimony. We also heard that in opening statements. But on the other side, defense had a rebuttal, said going to the Houck family farm was Crystal's idea. Moving forward here, we also see themes of inconsistencies in Houck's testimony versus his cooperation with law enforcement. So I am flipping through my notes now. We hear that Lasowski, the attorney for the Commonwealth, says, quote, "You'll see Brooks Houck provides no information about his whereabouts from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. on July the 3rd, just hours before Rogers went missing. He says experts will testify that his phone shows he's at the farm all day." So they're sort of filling in, painting this picture here that Houck is not giving information to police, while the defense says he is. He's been highly cooperative with police, actually allowing them to, search his car and his home without search warrants. Another big detail that we saw here is about a grand jury. The prosecution says that that Houck family members were secretly recording grand jury testimony with tape recorders. And Brooks Houck, and they say Brooks Houck says that Nick wants to hear this grand jury testimony. And these files were actually found through a search warrant at Nick and Rosemary Houck, Brooks' mother, home. But moving forward here, the defense actually says that because of this pressure, it was too much pressure on the Houck family. They just didn't want to get the family was so paranoid. Brooks was afraid something might get twisted. Those are the words of Steve Shoring. Moving forward to this last element here, has to do with Nick's Houck police cruiser. We know that there was a blanket in the back, and the prosecution says that you will hear a sort of frantic, worried phone call from Rosemary. And she's saying that this is, again, the attorney for the Commonwealth. You'll hear worried communication to Brooks. She says, "What about this blanket?" Well, why would you be concerned about your blanket? Attorney says, "Well, use your common sense." Now, moving forward here, defense rebuttals saying Rosemary's statement about the blanket. They say, "Well, look at all the context when you hear that." He says a quote, this is Shoring, quote, if you look at it through a sinister view, you'll come to a sinister conclusion. Those are some of the main points that we found. And of course, after opening statements concluded, witnesses, family, friends took the stand.
All right. Thank you so much, Alexander Goldberg, for us here going through all of that testimony. And we know that things are in a midday break right now, and she will be returning to the courtroom to see a little bit more of what happens, as is our Shay McAllister taking a seat in there. She's been through this case since day one. As we mentioned, the first day of trial full of bombshells. Alexandra has a more in-depth with testimony from day one.
Filling in the gaps, witnesses for the Commonwealth taking the stand, revealing July 3rd, 2015 was supposed to be a surprise date night for Crystal Rogers and Brooks Houck. Christina Hawley, a friend of Rogers, addressing the jury after opening statements concluded. Hawley says she was at Rogers' house earlier, the day she was last seen. She talked about taking the kids out to get pizza, but Rogers told her they couldn't because Houck wanted a kid-free night. But that never happened. Rogers and Houck went to the Houck family farm, and prosecutors say Rogers never returned. Rogers' cousin Amanda Greenwell doubling down on the couple's plans for a romantic night. Greenwell
Whenever it does that, I stop it so we don't miss anything.
on tape. Greenwell saying Rogers, quote, said she and Brooks were going on a surprise date. She didn't know what they were doing or where they were going. She was very excited, end quote. But Greenwell wasn't Rogers' only family member who took the stand on Wednesday. Rogers' daughter, Kylie Fenwick, emotional, describing her relationship with Houck. She testified, quote, I never had a father figure. I thought he was going to step up to the plate. Fenwick said on July 4th, she tried to call Rogers, but didn't get an answer. Unanswered by her mother and Houck. He never responded to Fenwick. Ending the day, former lead detective on the case, John Snow. A look at evidence collected in those beginning days. Snow said Rogers' car was swabbed for DNA, but law enforcement didn't get anything that provided evidence to who was driving the car at the time. Surveillance video also showing Houck's truck driving to the family farm at 7:30 and leaving around midnight. Snow saying Houck's story he told in a police interrogation from July 5th was consistent. In Bowling Green, Alexandra Goldberg, WHAS 11 on your side.
All right, and we are just taking a look now. You got a lot of people behind you, Alexandra. What are we expecting from this last half of the day after lunch?
Yeah, exactly, Brooke. You could tell by the action around me. It looks like we've now had a break for lunch. Expected to return in just a little bit now. John Snow will be cross-examined by defense, and we're expecting to see more witnesses take the stand today for full analysis. You can hear from myself, Shay McAllister, Doug Proffitt, and Nick Mudd tonight on WHAS 11 Plus for a 9 p.m. stream. Brooke.
Alexandra, thank you so much. WHAS 11 News is again committed to bringing you.
All right, guys. So that's about all we know right now in the Brooks Houck trial. I didn't want to come on any sooner than today with it because it just started this week. There's no cameras allowed in the courtroom, so I didn't figure we'd have much to talk about. But so we put yesterday's and this morning's and tonight's video. Now, they don't do their stream for the second half of the day, like you just heard, until like 9 p.m. So if you guys want to watch it tonight, check them out. It's the same people that the links are in the description of the video. and we will do another one either tomorrow night or the night after and just catch everybody up from today. And you know, I was outside earlier today and it was just so miserably hot, and I came back in the house and it was pretty cool. You know, my air conditioners had been left on. Got to fuss at Alan, he'll turn them off. But, and I was just so thankful. It just reminded me, like, just the little things, to be so thankful for the small things, the little things in life, like just having your bills paid, having your power bill paid, you know, having the roof over your head where you're not going to be homeless tomorrow. You know that you've got a place to lay your head. You know, and it be cool. When I was a kid, you know, we were poor and we didn't have air conditioning in my house, in my dad's house. And he lived in a duplex. So it was downstairs and upstairs. And the kitchen and the living room, all of the living places were upstairs in this duplex. And the air conditioner, we had one, but there was bird's nest in it. Like, no, we hadn't used it the whole time that they lived there. And, you know, I'd go over to my friends' houses and it was cool. And I was like, oh, this is cool. This feels pretty good. And you go home and you just laying in front of a fan begging, you know, or taking a cold shower or just whatever you can to stay cool. But we were used to it. You know, we never had air conditioning, so we didn't really know what we were missing unless we went to somebody else's house, you know. So just be grateful, y'all. Be grateful for the little things, the small things, you know, being able to go to the grocery store and buy dinner tonight. Kids ain't gonna go hungry tonight. You know, Alan brought me a new kitten yesterday, so now we've got number 5. But she's a sweet little thing and she's tiny, and I couldn't imagine leaving her out on the streets with no mother, nobody to feed her. She was starved to death. So, you know, just be grateful for the little things, because, you know, it can always be worse. I promise you. So many times in life I would think, you know, how can it get any worse? Oh yeah, don't ever think that, because God can show you real quick how much worse it can be. And then you might talk to your friend or talk to somebody or open your Facebook and look on there and see that somebody else just lost their mother or somebody else just lost their husband, or yet somebody else might have just lost their child. So, you know, don't ever think, woe is me, poor, poor, pitiful me, because I promise you, you don't have to look too far and you'll see somebody that's got it a lot worse than you. I once, what is that saying? Somebody said it to me a long time ago. I once complained of not having any shoes until I saw a man with no feet. That changed my life. Changed how I look at things completely. But anyway, thank you, Jesus, for another day being able to come together in your name, Lord. We just pray for all the needs that are out there, Jesus. There's so many people that have got needs, whether it be health-wise, physical, or emotional, or spiritual. No matter what it is, Lord, I pray that you touch each and every one of us according to our need, And I pray that you provide for us all. We know that we sure can outgive you. And so we just pray that you touch each and every one of our homes, Lord, financially. You know, help us to pay our bills. Help us to make enough this month to eat. But I love you, Jesus, so much. And I always ask you every day to forgive me for my sins. I thank you, Lord, for saving my soul. And until we meet again, we give you all praise, honor, and glory. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, y'all. We will see you all tomorrow. We're getting ready to start our new trial, our next trial watch. I don't know which trial we should watch, though. So if any of y'all got any suggestions, send me a message or something, okay? That's right, Dave. Thank you. Keep your gratitude higher than your expectations, and you'll have really good days. I love that. Amen, honey. Amen. All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace out, Girl Scout. Bye.